So this is part two of the video that I'm doing about a project I was involved in several years ago. It was a big project to build a water sharing system with a pump station. And if you haven't watched the first video, please go do that, because most of this won't make sense if you don't have that background. So in this second part, I wanted to talk about what the root causes were. How did we end up with this major problem in construction? Because I think there's some valuable lessons there. And then I want to talk about, what does it teach us when we think about the root causes of the problem? What does it teach us as surveyors and civil engineers and program managers, project owners, to do different, so that we don't find ourselves in this kind of situation? It's a really horrible situation. And I mentioned in the first part, I felt really bad for the civil engineer that was having to deal with this at the program manager. He inherited this mess. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. None of this was his fault. But that happens. Like he got stuck with a mess and was trying to sort it out. And some polite accusations have been made about my work. And so I was being forced to defend my work. So what were the root causes of this problem? We basically ended up with 3 or 4 different vertical datums. People were building on those different vertical datums, and things weren't lining up when they got to the middle of the project, and we're trying to tie in at the common point, which was the pump station. Now, I don't have the full picture, so I want to put that out as a disclaimer. This is my best idea of what happened, why these problems happened. I'm not going to say that I have all this correct. There almost certainly were things going on here that I was not privy to. As I mentioned in the first part, I had a very small role in the project, but based on the conversations I had and what I saw, this is what I was able to put together. So the first cause of the problems was, I think the JPA, the 2 cities that were funding the project, were just trying to design this on the cheap. I think that's what happened. When we made our initial recommendation that they get a control survey to cover the project, the program manager told me that the JPA doesn't want to pay for that. They don't think it's necessary. So they were either trying to do this design on the cheap, or they were getting bad advice. I don't know if they were getting bad advice from the program manager, or if they were getting bad advice from their internal folks. Obviously, they weren't getting good advice about why it's important to get a good control survey for a major infrastructure project. So they were either being cheap or they were following bad advice. I think that's pretty clear from the situation. The second root cause was the program manager didn't have a good surveyor on staff. So this survey work got piecemealed out to 5 different surveyors. I know for a fact some of those surveyors were selected based on low bid, not qualifications. There was no surveyor taking a comprehensive look at these issues from the 50,000 foot level. We tried to do that in the very beginning, and we were shut down. So this is part of the problem that happens when you hire a program manager and you don't ensure that program manager has a licensed land surveyor at the decision-making table, right? If the licensed land surveyor on your major infrastructure project is the sub of a sub of a sub, he or she isn't going to be able to help you manage this kind of risk, right? Their voice is going to get drowned out. And I'll be honest with you, the civil engineers don't understand. They didn't understand what caused this problem. So if you're a program manager or a project owner, you want to make sure you've got a licensed land surveyor somewhere fairly high up on the org chart for this kind of project. So that was another reason this happened. The program manager didn't have a licensed land surveyor in a decision-making capacity. Another reason this happened is the program manager ignored good advice about survey issues. So we tried. We warned them. I had it in writing. We had we sent them a proposal to do the work that would have prevented this issue, and they didn't take that advice. Now, to be fair to the program manager, I think they were being told no by their clients. Pretty sure the program manager is the one that had to pay for these design changes. So they allowed their client to put them in a position where they took on unnecessary risk, and they paid the price for that, I suspect. And that's unfortunate. So part of being a good civil engineer is knowing when to tell your client, we're not going to cut corners or do stuff on the cheap. So I think that was another problem. Another major contributor here was the program manager. The civil engineer at the program manager, the original civil engineer, prepared a control sheet with bad information. I tell civil engineers all the time, do not do that. Civil engineers are not usually qualified to prepare control sheets, especially not for design plans for a major infrastructure project. Have your control sheet prepared, reviewed, and signed by a licensed land surveyor. If they had done that, there is a really good chance that either A, I would have caught this problem, or B, that they would have been able to stick me with the bill. But they didn't do that. Somebody at the program manager signed a control sheet and put notes on there that were incorrect because she was practicing out of her area of competence. That's just, I know that it seems like that's a cruel thing to say, but it's the truth. I don't try and design parking lots or retaining walls. That's outside my area of competence. Civil engineers shouldn't deal with survey control issues and datums. It's not in their area of competence as a general rule. What was another reason? Another reason this happened, another cause, was the design team did some data mashup. They did some data mashing. You know, they're mashing up some different data sets without proper adult supervision. Somebody grabbed some LiDAR data, man, and they just used it. And it didn't have good metadata. They didn't know where it came from. They didn't know what vertical datum it was on. They didn't know how it was collected. And yeah, that ended up being a major issue. You know, they had some base flood elevations that they derived from that LiDAR data set, and kind of critical to know what vertical datum that base flood elevation is on. And they didn't know. They made some assumptions, and those assumptions turned out to be wrong. And then finally, the last cause was the design build surveyors. I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect the design build surveyors didn't ask enough questions. Now, it's possible they did. Maybe they were like me, and they asked the program manager, hey, how are we making sure all this fits together? And they got told the same thing I got told. Don't worry about it, it's not your job. What they were in a position to do, though, that I was not in a position to do, was to check the other surveyors' work. You got to remember, I came on really early in the process, right? Any of the surveyors working for those 3 design build teams could have talked to the other surveyors on the design build teams and identified this problem early on, and nobody did that. They were pouring concrete when this problem was discovered. So I think that was an issue. That was also an issue. Now, the JPA and the program manager decided to piecemeal the surveying, and they decided to hire some of that out low bid. So, you know, I want to be careful about how much blame I put on the private surveyors doing that work. You know, some of that's a consequence of how they were selected to do the job. So what are the lessons? Lots of lessons here. Lessons for land surveyors, lessons for civil engineers, lessons for program managers, lessons for project owners. So what are they? Man, I could do a whole 30-minute video on the lessons. For the sake of time, I forced myself to pick the top 3. So here's the top 3 lessons or takeaways from this story. Number 1, don't shop for land surveying services at your local flea market, especially if you're building a major infrastructure project. That's not going to turn out well. You can't believe that I have to tell people that, but here I am telling people that. You go shop for land surveying services at the flea market, you are going to have problems. You're going to get you are going to get flea market quality. Now, flea market quality is okay for a lot of, you know, you can go to the flea market and you get a good bottle of Jarritos and a good fish taco. Not a good place to shop for land surveying services on a major infrastructure project. So that was part of the problem here. Land surveyors are not hot swappable. We are not like AA batteries. The type of surveyor you hire really matters. And it can cause, a good surveyor can prevent major problems, and a bad surveyor can cause them. Lesson number 2. We talked about it a little bit. Have a role for a licensed surveyor on your program management team. Demand that your program management team identify a land surveyor that is going to have decision-making authority. That role should not be buried underneath the civil engineer. That should be a top-level role. That person should be at the table when project planning, route selection, and selection of subconsultants and subcontractors is when those kind of decisions are being made. You need to have a good land surveyor there. You know, there should have been a land surveyor involved when somebody grabbed that LiDAR data, and there wasn't. So have a decision-making role for a licensed surveyor on the project management team. The third lesson, do not mash together geospatial data for design purposes without the help of a good land surveyor. Don't do it. We're going to see this problem more and more because there's more and more publicly available geospatial data. It doesn't all fit together, people. Be careful. You can't, somebody thought they were going to save a ton of money by grabbing that LiDAR data set. And I'm not even saying that they couldn't use the LiDAR data. It's possible they could have used the LiDAR data if they had followed the right process, but they were trying to take a shortcut and they didn't get good advice or supervision, and it caused major problems on the project. So there you go. That is the story of the major pump station disaster. I had a small role in the project. I got put in a position where I had to defend my work. It was a sad story. I felt bad for the civil engineer at the program manager that was having to clean up this mess. But the saddest part of the whole situation was that it could have been prevented if the JPA, the two cities, and the program manager had followed my advice, our advice, and gotten good control surveys from the start of the design process.